Welcome to Cooking Time. I'm David Martone, the Executive Chef at Classic Time Cooking School here in Westfield. And today we're going to celebrate cauliflower. Cauliflower is one of those vegetables that I hear people love it or hate it. And Mark Twain once said that cauliflower is nothing but cabbage with a college education. So we're going to try and sway everybody over to the cauliflower side today. So a lot of different versions we're going to make, actually 4 different things if we can get through it. And of course there'll be stories to go through everything. So the first one is a cauliflower soup. I've got a little heat under my pan. I'll raise it up a bit, putting a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of butter because we're going to do a technique, a French technique, which I'll get to a little bit a couple minutes after we get this butter melted. So we start with a little butter and oil. The oil keeps the butter from burning so quickly. To that, we're going to add some chopped up leeks. Always remember to clean your leeks well. Dear friend and cooking instructor that I knew for many years, sadly she's gone now, Annie Casal, told me a great story about leeks. We want to get these tender and translucent, by the way. I'll keep interrupting my stories with little bits of the cooking show if you don't mind. So she was newly married, and she invited her father-in-law over, which was this proper Italian gentleman, and she made a dish with a lot of leeks in it. She didn't apparently clean the leeks too well, and they're just loaded with sand. And when he was eating the dish, the proper Italian gentleman that he was trying to be so polite, and she said, "Pop, what do you think of the food I made?" And he said, "Anna, this is a very good. No make it for me no more." And that's a true, proper Italian gentleman. But she went on to be a fabulous cook, and in fact wrote many books, and just a real treasure. And I learned so much from her. So my leeks are nice and tender. Now I'm adding a little bit of flour. So the butter melted and the oil, and adding the flour would be a roux from Cajun Creole cooking, Southern cooking. They even call it down country low cooking. So we're doing the same type of process, but in a different way. Where, as the French would say, sanger. We're sangering the aromatic leeks with the flour. So this is going to be a binding agent that helps thicken this soup, which, by the way, is called creme du barry, in case I didn't mention it. A little bit of cauliflower cut up, and I'll show you how to do that. We're going to now add some stock. We have our homemade chicken stock. And now we'll crank up the heat and get this simmering, and we'll just let that cook. So that's our creme du barry. I had to make this in culinary school for my midterm exam with Jacques Pepin. I don't want to say breathing down my neck, but we were a small class of 6, and so he kind of proctored or oversaw or monitored the midterm exam, and this was one of the dishes that I had to make. So I knew this dish beforehand because a friend of mine was dating a woman, and her mother and the rest of her family was from Germany, and they made a version of this. So I had actually learned to make this before, and I'll get back to that story because there's more to it. So we take our entire cauliflower head, and I've got it split into quarters here. So we first turned it over, and we took out all of the leaves and that little core. So when you clean it up, this entire section here, they actually call the curd of the cauliflower, because when you get it, there's leaves and stem kind of wrapped around it. So another item that I like to do with the cauliflower, another item is another dish, I should have said, is to cut this into what we call steaks, simply because it looks like a thick steak. We put these on a tray. We drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil, and this is how simple some of these dishes can be. Just a little tiny drizzle over the top, and we season it up with a little bit of salt and pepper, or in my case, I'm kind of partial to adobo. Adobo is a generic name. Goya just happens to be the manufacturer of this one. And I give it a little bit of a sprinkle, and I'll put this in the oven to start it roasting. So we'll have some nice roasted cauliflower that I'll work into a salad. We get this simmering, and we want to soften up this this cauliflower in the stock. And by the way, this is homemade stock. If you don't have homemade stock, you can certainly buy a store-bought and just season it up a little bit. Let me put the rest of our cauliflower on here. I'm going to now continue a little bit with the story as soon as I get working on this other item here. I have some of those cauliflower florets, which when you take the entire curd and you start to break it into small pieces, they're referred to as florets. So we have our florets that I've actually poached a little bit so they're nice and soft. This is a dish that my mom made on holidays. So it was really a special dish. And when you see how simple it is, you'll wonder why that's something that you would only make certain times of the year. And really what it gets down to is you appreciate it more. Growing up, we could know the beginning and the end of summer not by the calendar. It was the first day of summer, was the day the first pitcher of homemade iced tea came out that my grandmother brewed, seasoned, and made. And the last pitcher, when she said, "This is it," we knew summer was over. So the same thing with the cauliflower. We had it Thanksgiving, we had it Christmas, and we had it Easter. And so we learned to really appreciate it, and it was special to us to get that cauliflower. And to this day, my mom, who's 88 years old and still living on her own and driving, thank God, is making that cauliflower when we have holidays. So I still look forward to it a couple of times a year, except I cheat in between and make it a few times myself. So I'm going to simply start breading this, and I'm just going to line these 3 bowls up to flour, egg, and breadcrumb. It's called breading à l'anglaise. Growing up, we did egg and breadcrumb, and you had to be careful because, especially with something like chicken, when we made fried chicken, if you touched it too much, it would simply fall apart. The breading would come off. When I went to culinary school, of course, I learned some better techniques, and we learned that putting flour first makes it just a whole lot easier. So while I'm doing each piece, I'll do one, and then while I'm doing the others, I'll finish the story about the creme du baril. So I put a little bit of flour, then I put some egg, and then we put the breadcrumbs. And if you do it with your fingers, you'll wind up with fingers that are about this thick with flour, egg, and breadcrumb, except you won't want to fry those. So we get this breaded nicely, and then we just lay it out on our tray because we're going to saute them a little bit. So while I'm doing this, back to the soup. Good friend of mine, actually a great artist, and just the other day, it was funny, I Googled him. His name is Nicholas Gamarello. So I Googled Nicholas Gamarello artist, and did that under Google Images. And I was very surprised what came up because, just tons and tons of pictures because he's done so much incredible work. He worked directly for Ralph Lauren as one of his designers and so many other things. He's just a wonderful treasure. And when the items came up on Google Image, I was shocked to see that one of the second pictures was he and I standing together at a museum where he had some pieces being displayed. So when he was dating his wife in Jersey City, where I'm from, I always talk about Jersey City, great place to grow up and great place for me to still go back and reminisce. I went to his house frequently and got invited to his girlfriend's house, and his mom used to make this wonderful soup. Well, growing up as a nice Italian boy in Jersey City, your mom did a lot of things for you that you might not think of as a mother's duty. I have a friend whose mother used to actually iron his clothes, iron his underwear, and iron his money. Nick didn't have that done for him, but when our moms cooked, if they added something like a bay leaf, we never saw a bay leaf. We didn't know what it was. When it turned up in our dish, if it ever did, we didn't know what to do with it. So when a bay leaf turned up in Nick's soup bowl at his girlfriend's house, he just put it in his mouth, it came off the spoon, and he started chewing it. Bay leaves are generally almost impossible to chew, and he's there crunching, 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 and his girlfriend said to him, what are you eating? What's that crunching? And he said, the soup. And she said, what do you mean the soup? And he said, well, the leaf that was in it. And she said, you're not supposed to eat that. And he said, I didn't want to, insult your mom like there was something in the soup I was picking out. So I just decided to, suck it up and eat it. So I thought I always loved that story. But it really gave me my beginnings with the creme du baril. And I always like to think that I had a much easier time with it when I was cooking it in culinary school, and especially when I did my my midterm exam, which I did pass. So here we are today, and I'm cooking for you folks, making my mom's wonderful breaded cauliflower. Now, later on, after I was married and my brother-in-law got married, his wife, her family is from Sicily, where some of my family is from, and her mother makes the same exact dish, but the only difference is instead of cauliflower, she does it with broccoli. So you can do this breading with just about anything. Par cook it, and it's just wonderful. So our last piece is in here. We bread it up, and then we're going to start to saute it. So let me get this nicely coated. We've got our other piece of cauliflower roasting in the oven. Pick this out. I'll get rid of my flour, egg, and breadcrumb bowls. Remember, we call that breading à l'anglaise. Cauliflower soup is cooking down nicely. I'm going to lower it just a tad bit. Now I will just move this tray here, get our other pan going, put a little olive oil, and we'll start sauteing this. So we want to get that oil hot. A lot of people, when we start to cook something, regardless of the amount of oil, it looks like I put a fair amount in because I want to get a little bit of depth to it to be able to saute those uneven areas to make sure that I can get the oil to come in contact with it totally. But when you are doing this, never test that oil with anything other than a piece of food that you're cooking, or what I like to do sometimes is to simply take a wooden spoon and use the bottom of it, which is dry, but it's porous. So humidity tends to get trapped in that spoon. So when I put the spoon in and the oil is hot, if I'm seeing a tiny bit of bubbling around the edge of the spoon, I know that oil's nice and hot. Excuse me. People often say, I put a drop of water in it. And I explain to them it's probably the worst thing you can do, because if you've ever had water or any kind of liquid accidentally hit some hot oil, it splashes around and will burn you 6 or 7 times before you can get away from it. So that one drop of water will just dance around that pan. I put my spoon in, and as you can see, it's foaming, and I know that oil is nice and hot. I'll lower it down a little bit, and I'll start to add my pieces of cauliflower. Be very careful when you add the pieces. You don't want to get it to splash up on your fingers, because if you do, there's a high likelihood that it will get the tip of your fingers, and right where your nail meets your finger is an incredibly sensitive area. I know this from lots of experience burning myself many times, and you run a bigger chance of just getting a blister. I'm going to get a piece of paper towel and put it on my pan so that when I take these cauliflower florets out after they're browning, I can quickly trap some of that oil and remove it. So we're cooking nicely here. Let's see how we're doing as far as coloration. We're getting a nice browning, so I start to turn them. Being an odd shape, it's a little difficult to get them cooked evenly, so that's why we add a little bit more oil and we kind of dance them around in the pan to get different areas cooked. Breading and frying things and then blotting them out, you're consuming a very small amount of the oil, as long as you're not putting them in the pan before the pan is too hot. That's why I wanted to show you that trick just using the back of the spoon, because that's a surefire way of letting you know you've got it done perfectly. Because you really don't want to put things in when the oil is not hot, because the item itself will act as a sponge and it will draw in and retain all that oil. So you want to do it on the proper heat. See, we're getting nice crispness on these. This big one will be a little more problematic, but I'm sure we'll get it to cook nicely. So we're going to check our cauliflower that we put in the oven. So I don't want to intentionally trick you, but I did have this already roasted in the oven and simply switched it out with the other just to create the magic of television with time enhancement. So we have some wonderful roasted cauliflower that we're actually going to use for two different dishes. So really I was tricking you because I was putting this on with a pan that I knew wasn't really all that hot. But if I had put it in the wrong oven and grabbed it, you would have heard the loudest scream that you've ever heard on television in a long while. So let's turn this guy over this way. Let's turn this one over here. Sometimes I'm balancing them against the side of the pan so that they're kind of standing upright a little bit. This one will turn over this way a little bit and try and cook that there. And a little bit more on this side. I have to hold it sometimes just to get that last little bit. This brings back such memories because there would always be a plate of this because we ate it at room temperature. So this would be really one of the dishes that as kids we would sneak into the kitchen and grab a piece and run away and eat it. Which my mother knew exactly what she was doing. She was letting us snack on something that she knew was a healthier item rather than us finding some potato chips or something and snacking on that. So just a moment more on this one. See that nice brownness? That's what we're kind of looking to try and create in most of the area. This one I think needs to get on top a little. This one a little bit over there, and this one here. So while that's finishing up, I'm going to take another piece of, I'll actually set this up on top of my soup for a minute. I'll take my plate here, and one of these steaks, the nicer one, I'm going to save. Actually, it's probably easier for me to get this with a spatula. And I'm going to take some of this roasted one and put it here. This is going to be a cauliflower gratin. We're going to use some of the soup for this. So put that there. The other piece we're going to get ready for presentation. On our plate here, we'll get rid of this tray. Little by little, we get rid of everything. Okay, one more plate for, actually, I'm going to work in my roasted cauliflower with my cauliflower from Mom's recipe. Okay, now we'll get rid of this tray. Once we blot these up, I just kind of roll these around a little bit. You can make a wonderful aioli or something for this, but we just ate it with a little salt on it, and to this day I'm perfectly happy having it the same way. Put put that there in this tiny little piece, and we can get rid of this one too. So, next up, we have to finish our soup. So the soup has been cooking for a while, and now we need to grind it up. So this is an immersion blender. We're going to make a little bit of noise with this. It's like a food processor on the end of a shaft. We're going to put this in and grind this all up. In culinary school, if you can hear me over all this noise, we actually did this, and then we ran it through a very fine strainer. And then the finale for this was to add some egg yolk, raw, that we stirred in, and a little heavy cream. I don't strain it anymore, although I had to do it in culinary school to achieve a passing grade. And I don't like to put the cream or the egg yolk in. I like to serve it in a more natural way. And the one thing that I take back from my friend Nick's mother-in-law is adding a little bit of this, which is actually has its origins in Switzerland, but also used, oddly enough, in a lot of Asian cooking. This is an umami flavor, a protein flavor, but it is all vegetable base. So here's our wonderful soup. And I put just a drop of this. I guess you could equate this flavor to not only a protein, but perhaps like a little bit of soy sauce. And Nick's mother-in-law used to serve a little splash of this on top of the soup. Okay. So we're going to separate this and put half here. And we'll get rid of the other half over here. And then we'll get a bowl for our soup. We'll put, oh, I even have a pouring side on the pan. I didn't realize that. We'll put some of our soup here. We'll take some of our soup and put it over the top. And it's amazing where you get your knowledge and inspiration. This was a dish that we actually made when I worked after culinary school in Chez Catherine here in Westfield. We put a little bit of grated cheese over it. This is some actually shredded Parmesan and a little bit of shredded Gruyere cheese. And then we pop this in the oven to kind of crisp up, or as the French would say, gratin. So I'm giving you some experience I got from wonderful Chez Catherine here in Westfield. So our soup, I'll finish with a tiny little droplet, even though I seasoned it with this, just to remember Nick's wife's mother, Mary, his wife Mary's mother, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. A couple of drops of the Maggi, and a little bit of some parsley. You could put a variation of whatever types of herbs you'd like with that. But we have our wonderful creme du baril there, and I will just put a spoon in it, which makes it a little bit more inviting. Now I want to kind of finish this up a little bit more. So what we're going to do is to put a little salt and pepper. Remember in a previous show that we've done with arugula, using it as a base, we put a little salt and pepper as we do seasoning every step of the way. And then we're going to put a little extra virgin olive oil. Just a little drizzle, which actually I'm going to not only do it there, but on top of this little cauliflower steak, that I'll call it. A little bit of lemon juice. This kind of makes it more of a balanced looking dish, not only with color to give it an artistic juxtaposition, but you're eating from different vegetable groups, which is great because you want to try and pack as much as you can into these items. Get rid of that one. You know, when you get a dish that has such a balance of nutritional qualities and flavor qualities, and also artistically presented, it's really a wonderful thing. You could sprinkle nuts on it. You could do whatever you want. Sometimes I cut up Kalamata olives and sprinkle that on top of the cauliflower steak. I think today I'm going to put a little bit of a balsamic glaze, readily available in the supermarket, and actually comes in a lot of different flavors. You'll see ones that are flavored with fig or flavored with cherry. So we just put a little bit of the balsamic drizzle, which really makes it a nicer presentation. Let me take a look at my gratin of the cauliflower. Just another minute or so. So the creme du baril has many origins in the French cuisine and also in the German, even Swiss cuisine. When I was in culinary school, I had an instructor, Chef Martone, and I talked to him about this Maggi, and he told me it was a vegetable-based product, and it's derived from a plant protein, and the plant was a green called lovage. And lovage actually looks like an unmatured celery growing, like very thick stalks of parsley, but with like celery leaves on it. So he knew that I was interested in this, and his mom was living in Switzerland, where he was from. And so he wrote to his mom and asked her if she could send seeds for lovage, because I hadn't known about it and I never really looked for it. And when the seeds came, now this product is called Maggi. Excuse me. When the seeds came, I was kind of surprised to learn that the seeds were labeled Maggi kraut. And so this lovage that is the derivative of this actually is the product that went into this, and the seeds that came, I planted it in my yard, and it was like mint. It took me years after to get rid of the Maggi kraut lovage, but I enjoyed growing it and experimenting, but sometimes you do something that doesn't work out quite as well as you think, but I still love the Maggi to this day. So let me get our gratin out. Again, a dish that I credit from my years at Chez Catherine here in Westfield. So today we've done my mom's breaded cauliflower. We've done a wonderful salad that could be a main course for someone who's not a meat eater, with a cauliflower steak roasted. We took some of that roasted cauliflower, put it in a pan here, topped it with some cheese and some of the creme du baril soup, which I tell you, seeing that Maggi, I have to... Can't imagine the flood of memories that come from so many different places at one time. Folks, I'm David Martone, Executive Chef here at Classic Thyme in Westfield, New Jersey. Thank you for watching.